Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
So, how you feel about this card, Arclight Phoenix?
I mean, it's pretty good, particularly. I mean, it's already good in standard, but my goodness, is it good in modern?
Yeah. What do you think? It's the addition of Thought Scour that makes the card, right? Thought Scour.
I mean, Thought Scour is pretty fantastic with it. Yeah, I mean, like this past weekend in Los Angeles, definitely Arclight Phoenix decks were out in force, including taking the top spot in the hands of Michael Burnett and using the it's that same crackling Drake's sort of recipe we saw before, Thing in the Ice, Arclight Phoenix, but the new addition of Terramander, obviously not too bad of a card, which also helps really open up like this main deck Charter Course. And but generally, though, it's just Thought Scour, and I think also, even more importantly, Faithless Looting.
Yeah, I think that's the one. So Faithless Looting, I think, is the card that really makes Arclight Phoenix a standout in Modern. Like, there's just these draws sometimes. You're just like, first turn Faithless Looting, discard 2 Phoenixes, and you have 2 gut shots or some ridiculous thing like that. Those hands happen.
It's much more about the, discard 2 Arclight Phoenixes, and then on the next turn do something like Manamorphose, Lightning Bolt, and Serum Vision or something,
Yeah, those draws happen even more frequently. But I mean, I'm sure you have too, but I've personally seen the 2 gut shot opening hand draw. So it is obviously less frequent.
Or surgical extraction, man. Sometimes you just got to extract your own gut shot.
Yeah, I mean, if you do what you got to do. Yeah, I was just going to say, like in Burnett's version, he's got a surgical extraction in the main deck. We used to see more gut shots, but same idea. Yep.
Yeah, from what I hear, even though this deck performed amazing, I hear it's better than that. And
it's better than amazing?
Yep, I have it on good authority that Arclight Phoenix is that it is the best deck.
I've heard the same thing. I've heard some some little gambly grumbles that Faithless Looting might not be long for the modern world. So
you really think? I mean, I know it's not like the biggest superstar in this deck, but it's always the card. It's always the problem child in all of these decks. You don't think Manamorphose's days are numbered?
No. I don't find Manamorphose even remotely offensive.
Never. You think Manamorphose is just never going to be banned?
It's very different than the cards that cost 1. I'll tell you that. And
I know it doesn't cost any.
It costs 0. Really, the thing is, like, there are so many people. Even when you have a Jerry Thompson, even when you have a Josh Hunter-Layton, there are so many magicians out there who just don't have any Manamorphoses in their decks. It can't be the same as a Preordain or some of these other 1 casting cost manipulation cards. Maybe I'm completely wrong.
Dude, Modern is just all about these 0 cost cards, though. I mean, like, for instance, what about Mox Opal? You don't think that one's ever getting banned?
I don't. My current vision of Modern does not see Mox Opal ever getting banned. But the thing is, when you print more and more cards that can go into linear strategies, right, or the kind of synergy snowballing strategies, how am I supposed to know? Maybe you just dump a ton of artifacts very, very quickly again, right? Look, we've seen that happen sometimes, and we've seen other times when the best artifact deck doesn't even play Mox Opal. So I don't see that, but if there's a ton of super cheap artifacts, then that card gets demonstrably better.
Well, what do you think about second place Gal Schlesinger's version of Hardened Scales Affinity that was like so turbo as to not only have the 4 obvious Mox Opals, but 3 welding jars? And this is that animation module Hardened Scales sort of a deck with Hangerback Walker, Arcbound Ravager, Steel Overseer, Walking Ballista. It's definitely a +1/+1 counters deck, and it just sort of looks vaguely affinity adjacent.
You think that it's only affinity adjacent? I think it's just like direct.
Dude, if you don't have 1, any cards with affinity, and 2, no cranial plating. I mean, I think this is only affinity adjacent.
I think this deck is just like direct competition to the traditional kind of red robots deck, or I don't know, whatever blue robots deck.
Affinity could have galvanic blast or something, right? But it's got to at least have cranial plating. If you don't have cranial plating, to me, that's where we're talking about two different decks.
So my real question is, did this deck extinct the cranial plating deck? Or is this an evolutionary kind of next stage, or is it just a competitor and it's better contextually?
You ever notice how many of these mono green decks are just full of colorless cards, and then they just splash black cards like Dismember, Surgical Extraction that don't require any mana? It's just like Tron. This is just a really, 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 really low to the ground Tron deck.
I mean, Tron actually has black sources sometimes, right?
Or Eldrazi. This is like an Eldrazi aggro deck, but it's just really low to the ground.
But it's kind of not, right? Like, it's investing mana in cards like Walking Ballista and Hangerback Walker sometimes.
Yeah, an animation module.
Like,
just keep activating it.
On the note of that Faithless Looting question that we had a second ago, I mean, what's crazy to me is, like, Faithless Looting really is the problem. If you're just, like, in this situation where you're just casting 0 Hangerback Walkers or Walking Ballistas so you can get triggers because you had just used the Faithless Looting, that's like an odd thing to be a great deck, right? Like, here's this card that people normally like to spend mana on. I'm just going to throw mine into the trash.
Dude, could these decks... I guess you don't have any blue mana, but man, this deck sure could flip an Arrayo. Mox Opal, Welding Jar, Hangerback Walker, Walking Ballista.
So it has 6 forests, Horizon Canopy, some a Pendelhaven, Llanowar Reborn, which is not even that exciting. You could just turn those into blue-green dual lands and do that all you wanted. If it had a Rayo, this would have like a very meaningful different game plan, and at least in sideboarded games or some matchups. Like, I mean, like, that's very difficult for some decks to ever interact with, right? Like, they're just behind. Like any kind of super slow deck that's actually paying 3 or more mana for its spells in Modern is just not a fan of that.
No. Dude, when is Tree of Tales going to get unbanned?
Yeah, I mean, well, once... when the world changes in a certain direction, then cards like cranial plating get dramatically better than they already are, right? Isn't that kind of the problem?
What do you mean the problem? You're just saying things that are true. That doesn't mean it's a problem.
Well, I think like the problem that is not currently a problem that they're anticipating might happen if they unban Tree of Tales. The Tree of Tales would go straight into this deck, right? It would be...
Dude, okay, how about Vault of Whispers instead, then?
I think they have to bring them all back at the same time, right? Isn't that... It's kind of...
I mean, you could, but I was thinking like maybe all of them except Ancient Den. 'Cause, we got to draw the line somewhere.
I used to always say no one ever lost to an Ancient Den. I mean, there might have been Ancient Den in the deck, but probably wasn't even there. But nobody ever lost to that. Like, people lost to all the other ones, but like, what are you going to get, Leonin Abunist or whatever? Like, that's just not. No one ever lost to that. It's not a thing that ever sent a young magician home in tears. Ancient Den didn't happen.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe they're being a little bit, too quick to rule them all out at once.
Well, just on the note of just how this format is going, there were 2 dredge decks in the top 8 of Grand Prix Los Angeles last week. And I think that this is like, I mean, obviously this kind of a deck has existed for quite a while, but it's like really resurgently popular right now. Right? In a way, it wasn't like a month.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been on the upswing, and I wonder how much of that is the increase in popularity of Arclight Phoenix decks.
That's actually weird to me, right? Like, because I don't think it's a very good strategy against Arclight Phoenix decks, but a lot of people bring in anti-graveyard against them. Like, it's weird to me that the popularity of a deck that people...
Well, Surgical is, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm talking about, you just watch coverage matchups and there's just like a rest in peace in play. Like, people sided that in. And then, like, somebody's attacking them with an Arclight Phoenix that they hardcast. You know, it happens all the time.
Yep, true.
But these decks are great against Arclight Phoenix decks? Is that the bet?
No, I don't think they're great. I just think I'm trying to figure out, like, what all things are going on. Like, why is this one surged in popularity? Because it hasn't really gained anything.
But it's massively more popular. Like, a month ago, this was like 15 spots down on the popularity scale. It's like a top 5 deck right now. So... I think that the big get in the last year or so is obviously Creeping Chill, right? So we've got like the Shriekhorn Creep and Chill combo, and Shriekhorn is a great enabler for all just the random graveyard cards, whether they're dredge cards or kind of come back from the graveyard creatures that this deck has always had. And then I think like the Chill plan is very, very powerful here because it just kind of softens the opponent up, because a lot of these games, it just ends up being... flashback on Conflagrate to finish the game anyway, right? So you're just like, all right, here's my hand, and so like all those things I think just kind of get to that Conflagrate point a little bit faster, and you just get some amalgam hits in or something. But it's just not. It's not like the dredge decks that we saw like 10 years ago or something that were like relentless Icarid attacks, or, you know, like one big turn, everybody gets haste, you know, here come 100 zombies. It's not like that. You just got like some guys like flip some Narcomoebas. Half the time I think the Narcomoebas are just chump blocking.
I mean, it's kind of almost gone full circle to like a Frigorid type of space, right?
Like...
You're valuing out some inevitable unkillable threats.
Yeah, I'm not.
You're just not super over the top. No,
no. It just seems like a kind of chip shot deck. We're just like, here's 2, here's 3. Sometimes it's 12. You know, I mean, but not all the time. It's like,
yeah, but that's it. What about Frigorid? The original old school Rizzo. That wasn't just 12 all the time.
I felt like here's the thing with the Frigorid deck. First of all, I often felt like I was getting in for 6 or whatever, but it also had a Psychotog deck. It was an outstanding Psychotog deck because the dredge thing allowed you to eat your graveyard in a way that Psychotog decks in the past never really had that much. You know, there was a lot of like combination of hand because they had just cast an upheaval, so there'd be like a ton of action from hand, or a combination of hand and graveyard. But that deck was just like, here's my graveyard, plus 10. So I feel like that was a real important element of that deck, especially if you were just like mock second turn Psychotog or something against like a creature deck. They couldn't really kill it that well back then in Extended. You just killed them.
Dude, why doesn't anybody play Aether Snap in Modern? That would go after those Hardened Scales people. The Darksteel 3 black sorcery, remove all counters from all permanents and remove all tokens from the game. You get it coming and going against the Hangerback Walker.
I don't know, how much does that cost again?
It only costs 1 more than Creeping Corrosion.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of people relying on Creeping Corrosion, and the ones that do have like pretty good blockers, right? Like the Creeping Corrosion decks could usually deploy like some guys to soak up some damage to get themselves to the point that they can cast it. But I don't know, like what black creature deck is there that's I'm signing up for a 5 casting cost sorcery. What I do think is maybe a little underplayed. Isn't Hercule's Recall legal? Somewhere?
Yeah.
That guy, I think that's a one that I might have my eye on.
Dude, how do people pick the cantrips for Grixis Death Shadow decks? Wait, like what is the formula? What is the algorithm? Like Frankie Rodriguez's Grixis Death Shadow deck that he top 8'd with. Like, okay, 4 Thought Scour. Not everybody plays 4 Thought Scour, but okay, I like it. You know, he's playing 4 Gurmag Angler. I could be into it. Okay,
I'm into it. That's on my front line if I'm this type.
2 Serum Visions.
Weird. That's just weird.
Oh, okay.
Because that one's better than Thought Scour.
3 Mishra's Baubles.
Also weird. You're a Gurmag Angler deck, you say.
1 Faithless Looting.
See, that's the one that's the super oddball to me. Like, I mean, it's a powerful card, but it's not particularly synergistic in this deck.
Right, so we're talking, 4 Thought Scour, 3 Mishra's Bauble, 2 Serum Visions, 1 Faithless Looting. Like, that's the progression of cantrips you play? How? How did you arrive at that?
So I do think that Thought Scour should be a 4 of. I'm a big fan of that. I think that I would play both Mishra's Bauble and Serum Visions as 4 ofs. But, like, Frankie had to make room for, like, 2-teamer Battle Rage. Like, a lot of people don't play any teamer Battle Rage in the main deck, right? So, or they play 1. So if he had to make room for a second one. And he's got, like, 2 Dismember and 4 Fatal Push. But he has, like, no Lightning Bolts, right? So that's actually not that unusual. 3 Snapcaster.
No, he's got a Lightning Bolt. It's just in his sideboard.
No, I'm talking about his main deck. But he's got like 3 Snapcaster Mages. It's kind of heavy on Snapcaster Mages. You know, people sometimes they don't have any.
Yeah, it's a good card though, I guess.
I mean, is it that great of a card in a deck that has only 17 lands and some of these cards cost more than 1?
Well, you see, that's part of the reason why you have Mishra's. No, that's part of the reason why you have Faithless. No. I don't know, man. I like Snapcaster Mage alongside Lightning Bolt, so it's weird to cut the bolts for the Snapcaster Mages.
Well, he's only got 1.
I just don't understand. I just don't understand how you arrive at the cantrip numbers you do in these Death Shadow decks.
If you were going to sketch out a Grixis Death Shadow deck, what would your configuration look like? Do you think? 4 Serum Visions, yeah. Start there.
Probably. I mean, maybe it's just too much air, but I feel like I would just play 4 Mishra's Baubles, 4 Thought Scours, and 4 Serum Visions.
Same. And I don't think that's too much air. Because you also have Street Wraith, right? Like, it doesn't have a lot of lands, and its whole thesis is its stuff costs 1, and you're just doing a bunch of stuff, damaging yourself, and then you've got like a 13/13.
Seriously, though? I honestly think I might just play Manamorphose.
In this deck?
Yeah!
I love you, but you cray.
No, dude, Manamorphose is the most broken card. That's free. In times where you draw 2 land.
Yeah, I mean, like, the 2 land, they all have 2 land, but, like, the way that it works is they're swamp, they're basic.
No, I think in Grixis, Death Shadow, no. No, I don't think I would play Manamorphose in Grixis Death Shadow. But, like, you know how some of these Death Shadow decks have, like, Tarmogoyf or whatever? If I was also playing Tarmogoyf, besides, how else are you going to 4-color without Manamorphose to fix your colors, man?
I don't know. The green cards are actually there for that. You need to traverse. The Ulvenwald awaits.
Yes.
So here's the thing. I'm just looking at Frankie's card choices. Like, Collective Brutality 3X in the sideboard. Like, wasn't there a time where that was a really popular main deck card?
Yeah, but I actually kind of like it not as a main deck card right now.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of that card. I mean, in the sense that I always thought it was good. You know, like, I'm not.
It's a fun card.
Like, I don't want other people to have it against me.
You know what's kind of surprising to me, though, is that nobody puts Collective Brutality and Arclight Phoenix in the same deck.
Yeah?
Doesn't that seem like that'd be a good combo?
Yeah, I mean, wasn't there the Mardu version before all these blue-red decks came out? That did not have Collective
That's true. No, it probably had a couple Collective Brutalities. Yeah, you're right. Of course, Jerry, my new ideas were Jerry's 2 months ago. I get it.
I was trying to scope out like a Boros Arclight Phoenix deck earlier this week, you know, with some Nahiri action, and then you could just do the same thing with all like the blue cantrips with like terrible white cantrips, like Festival of the Guild Pact. I was like, maybe there's something here. There's not. Don't worry about going that direction. I was just thinking like maybe you could play Core Firewalker in the sideboard and get the edge against other Phoenix decks. That was my kind of where I was getting to.
Dude, you are always thinking about Core Firewalker.
Well, I don't even play Core Firewalker most of the time when I'm playing decks that can play it.
I'm not saying you play it. Yeah. I'm just saying you think about it.
Yeah, it's like the most dangerous card in Modern. Like, if someone casts it against me, I usually lose.
So why don't people play Arclight Phoenix in Legacy? Like, the Legacy Open from this past weekend also won by an Izzet deck full of cantrips. But no Arclight Phoenixes, just Delver of Secrets and Terramander.
Well, let's start with the card drawing or cantrip type cards in this deck, and then I think we'll kind of get that answer. Like, there's outstanding, one casting cost, fixing, filtering, card draw, whatever you want to call it here. Brainstorm, Ponder, Preordain, but none of those cards are putting cards into the graveyard. I think that's a key difference. There's like no looting effects in this deck. So if you draw the Phoenix, it's in your hand, and there's no like good thought scoury way to get it directly from your library into your graveyard in this archetype. Or in the way it's
we could just play Thought Scour and Faithless Looting.
You could. I think that this...
Dude, you could play Intuition.
So I don't think...
Don't you want to just Intuition for Arclight Phoenixes?
Like, if I'm intuitioning... Like, wouldn't I just rather Intuition for Crippling Chills?
Oh, I'm talking about playing both.
You want Intuition for all those cards?
Well, it depends on what the game state's like. Right? Like, I'm saying, what about we build a Crippling Chill deck with, like, Bolts and Chain Lightnings and Brainstorms and Force of Wills and Pond, all that shit, all that stuff, right? But then we also, we have an Arclight Phoenix package.
I mean, just play 3 or 4 Arclight Phoenixes in that deck, and all the rest of your cards actually just make them come out, right? Like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Would we like sideboard Young Pyromancer?
Yeah. I don't think you want to main deck it. You could. I like it. I like it as a sideboard, though.
I did want to talk about this deck that won the Legacy Open because it's...
Are you talking about Rich Callie's Open?
Yeah, Rich Callie's win. So I played a lot of Izzet Delver in my day in Legacy back when I played that archetype. And it's interesting to me like how this archetype has moved. So Izzet Delver was like the premier Snapcaster Mage deck for a long time. In part because it had the interaction of Snapcaster Mage and Price of Progress. It's interesting to me, there's not even any Price of Progress in this deck. It's completely gone away from that towards like more creature-based attack. I think like Young Pyromancer is kind of like the more mana-efficient Snapcaster Mage, maybe? What do you think about that?
I don't know. I think Young Pyromancer is just its own. It's just a threat on its own, and it really takes advantage of all these extra spells. It's like a single card that can just take over the game. And sometimes you can protect it with stuff like Force of Will, or even, it sounds funny, but even like Vapor Snag is. But I think that it's like just winning with Delver of Secrets and Terramander alone is it's. Let's put it this way. By playing with a few more threats than these decks normally, or at least used to play with, it turns on Light Up the Stage.
Yeah, so there's 2 things going on here that I think are really meaningful. One of them is the inclusion of Terramander, which is like another, just for blue that you can play on the first turn, really changes how this deck plays its opener. Because in the past, because the blue-red deck didn't have green, the creatures that it played were typically either Goblin Guide or Monastery Swiftspear or maybe Grim Lavamancer, which are all red, right? So in Legacy, it's different than in Modern. If you use your fetch, you really often want to get a basic, because if you get a Volcanic Island, you might just not have any land the rest of the game, right? So just the fact that they can just consistently get a blue to play their 1-drop is very, very meaningful there. And then Light Up the Stage... I'm almost a little sad that there's only 3 copies. I feel like this is very easy to catalyze in this archetype, and it's very, very Treasure Cruise to me.
Dude, I love Light Up the Stage here, and I look at that one Preordain, and I'm so suspicious.
You think it should just be Light Up the Stage number 4?
Don't get me wrong, I would generally err on the side of 4 Chain Lightning, 0 Vapor Snag, but I can believe the first Vapor Snag might be better than the 4th Chain Lightning. It's surprising to me, but I could believe it. But man, I like Light Up the Stage here more than this Preordain.
So I've just been looking at this deck list, and I will defend the Chain Lightning decision insofar that when you're playing like 4 Lightning Bolt, 4 Chain Lightning, you get a lot of value out of playing with Snapcaster Mage, right? Like that's just so much compounding damage. And if he doesn't have Snapcaster Mage, it's not that there's less pressure to play it, it just doesn't get as much out of it.
One thing I will say about only playing 3 light up the stage is it does have slightly diminishing returns, right? Because, like, the second light up the stage you draw when it's on, it's great, of course, right? But it doesn't increase your win percentage as much as the first one did. And if you don't have it turned on, then, like, the second light up the stage is actually disproportionately worse, right?
Yeah, but the only thing I'd say is I think that's kind of a thin argument, only in that...
It is, because you could just bolt them.
Every card in this deck, except for True Name Nemesis and Young Pyromancer, is 1 or fewer mana. Like, there's several or fewers in this deck. So, I think that if your light up the stage is on, like, your cards are going to be live.
Well, I mean, Force of Will and Daze, it's like, I don't know. It seems super good to light up the stage, particularly when light up the stage gets to clear the stuff you don't want from Ponder.
Yeah, so, I mean, this deck is just, like, fearless of Reanimator, right? Like, he's got 1 Vapor Snag to interact with Reanimator, like in the side.
1 Graph Digger's Cage and 2 Surgical, and at a certain point, you just scoop the matchup and don't worry about it.
But, my only problem with that is oftentimes after sideboarding, the Reanimator deck doesn't bring its guys out of the graveyard. So, like, the Surgicals are less meaningful there.
So, I mean, on the topic of Reanimator, what did you think of Jonathan Castanja's Rectos Reanimator deck?
So, I don't know
if I would call it Jund, personally.
Jund?
Dude, he's got Bayou to cast his Reverent Silence.
He's got an Assassin's Trophy ×2 in the sideboard.
Yeah, but he is kind of 5 colors, because 4 Chancellor of the Annex is white, and Tidespout Tyrant is blue.
Yeah, so I don't think we've ever talked about this archetype on the
Reanimator?
No, the black-red Reanimator versus like the blue-black Reanimator. So I love this archetype. I think it is awesome. If you've ever seen it in action, like the first turn plays with this deck are so cool. Like, you'll often see stuff like, mulligan to 6 and then keep reveal Chancellor of the Annex for their disruption, and then they do like land Dark Ritual in 2 mana make dead or something on the first turn. Like, the addition of Lotus Petal and Dark Ritual to like just turbo the Entomb or the Faithless Looting and the Reanimator.
And if you're on the play, you could just go get Spire of Insanity, right?
Yeah, that's actually one of the main things, because you're just dumping your own hand, right? When you're playing, like, you're the Lotus Petal, Dark Ritual, Entomb, Faithless Looting guy, you're always like down in cards, like that's your thing. So Sire of Insanity, just everybody plays the same game except I have a 6/4.
Dude, I do love Chancellor of the Annex.
It's so cool, right? Like, it's sometimes you just draw multiple, like. So Chancellor of the Annex is 4 WWW for a 5/6 angel. It has flying, but it has so it's white. It's very, very difficult to cast in this deck. But it has a bunch of extra text. One of its abilities is you may reveal this card from your opening hand. If you do, when each opponent casts his or her first spell of the game, counter the spell unless that player pays 1. So it's a floating force spike, right? If you have it in your opening hand, which is one of the main sources of disruption in this deck, because it doesn't have Force of Will, right? Other Reanimator decks often have Force of Will, Daze, stuff like that. So you just have this card in your opening hand, reveal Chancellor of the Annex, and it prevents people from, first turning you a lot of the time. But then separately from that, if it's in play, it has these following abilities. Flying, so it's a 5/6 flyer, and separately, whenever an opponent casts a spell, counter it unless that player pays 1. So everything is basically force spikes when Chancellor of the Annex is in play.
Yeah, so it can actually be very disruptive as a Reanimator target. Like, if you just put like, let's say your opening hand is something along the lines of like land, Faithless Looting, Lotus Petal, Reanimate.
Yep.
That's pretty good. Like, your opponent's just starting the game with all their, like, you have them on a 4-turn clock, and they can't do anything on the first turn. It would just get countered. Turn 2, they have 2 mana. Like, there are a lot of people who can't win on the. First of all, it's very hard for somebody to combo off with a Chancellor of the NX in play. But second of all, there's some people who are going to have difficulty killing a Chancellor of the NX before it kills them if it's turn 1.
Oh, it's almost worse than that, right? So if you used Faithless Looting to get a Chancellor of the NX that was in your hand into the graveyard to reanimate on the first turn, well, you have already done the reveal, right? So they've got the floating force spike, but then the Chancellor's also in play, right? The problem for the opponent is not only are they just pinned from the multiple force spike pressure, there's so many decks in Legacy that keep a 1-land hand because they have all these filtering cards. So if you're like, all right, I was relying on my Ponder to get my second land, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to want to do in Legacy, that ain't gonna happen for you. Just not.
Yep. The nice thing though is that like they could just bait out your thing, right? Like on turn 1, they can just play the 1-cost spell and like soak up the Annex, like the Chancellor's start a game trigger, and then on turn 2 be rolling, casting that Ponder if they drew a second land. You know, and all they need to do is get up to 4, and then they can double bolt the Chancellor.
So your expected life total is 5 at this point, and everything has to have gone your way, and you're down a card.
Hopefully you didn't fetch.
Well, at least you only fetched for 1, right? It's not Modern, right? You didn't take 3.
Yeah. What do you think of this mix of Sideboard, Elish Norn, and Iona?
This is an Entomb deck, right? So 1 copy goes a very long way. The thing that I'm a little kind of head scratchy on is I think I'd rather have Iona than Tidespout Tyrant in the main deck. Like this deck doesn't get a lot of Tidespout Tyrant action.
I don't know. I like 1 Tidespout Tyrant. I think the key to Tidespout Tyrant is that it's your answer to all permanents.
To anything, yeah.
I love an Iona, don't get me wrong, but man, I do like a Tidespout Tyrant in particular if you're playing without blue. Because I think that if you don't have Force of Will, it's kind of nice to have another way to, if your opponent just did something sick, to have a plan, you know?
Every single spell is just unsummoned, right? So, or Boomerang, I guess.
What do you think of Pack Rat Magus of the Moon Transformational Sideboard Plan?
Hate it. Sick as 14 Lance.
Yep.
Hate it.
Dude, if you can get 3 of your 4... Dude, if you just go turn 1, Dark Ritual, Pack... You can go turn 1, Lotus Petal out the Pack Rat, and then turn 2, you could, like, Dark Ritual, make a rat, get in there for 2.
I don't even know when I want Pack Rat. I mean, like
it's graveyard hate.
Who loses to Pack Rat? Number 1. Okay, this is Legacy. All right, everyone can kill a Pack Rat or can race a Pack Rat. There's no decks that cannot do one of those two things. Right, and then the operating mana on the Pack Rat. This is like expectation 5 or something.
Dude, you know how easy if you okay. Let's say you just have a Pack Rat in your graveyard. You can just reanimate it and only take 2.
Wow. Tell me more. Is there a newsletter I can sign up for? This is phenomenal. Yes, I do not like that strategy. I think that we can do better in a deck that can literally search for any kind of creature and have it in play on the first turn. If it was a little fancy, you could even get like an Emrakul. I mean, you have to get a little fancy, right? Fancier than this stuff right now, but you could do it. You work hard enough.
So we talked about Delver of Secrets in the context of the usual Izzet deck. What did you think about this Stoneblade deck that adopts Delver of Secrets that Harlan Fire was packing? You know, it's not too exotic for the most part, other than it's obviously a little uncommon to see 4 Delver of Secrets in a Stoneblade deck.
Yeah, I guess that was more common in like the Jeskai versions, right? So that the straight blue-white versions were more controlling, often more copies of Snapcaster Mage or Jace. I don't know. Like this is like an initiative play. Delver Seekers is a great card, right? It just wins the game by itself if the opponent doesn't deal with it immediately. Awesome with Brainstorm and Ponder, obviously. I think Delver Spell Pierce or Delver Days Force of Will that's just game, I think, a lot of the time. And I think there's just an incentive is my point. I don't know. The one that I always scratch my head on is True Name Nemesis. I know it's a powerful card, but it's like 3 mana. Is it so much better than a Snapcaster or a Jace?
I think so. I really like a couple True Name Nemesis in this deck, at least 2 or 3. I think, I'm into the True Name Nemesis part. But I think there's something to be gleaned from this Azorius deck, because if you look, obviously we see this Azorius Stoneblade deck finishing top 4 here, but one also finished just outside at 9th, and then another finished 12th, and then another finished 18th, and another finished 24th. Like, this deck was just all over the place. And there's some variation, like, for instance, one of them had a single copy at Teferi. One of them had no Planeswalkers. I don't know what's going on with Thomas Smiley's 24th place list. He had 1 Niv Magus Elemental.
Maybe
that's a little wild.
I mean, that's just a Jerry T special, right? Like, maybe not in this archetype, but I mean, Jerry T loves a Niv Magus Elemental. Dude,
he had Cataclysm in the sideboard. Talk about a throwback.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm looking. Does he have cool enchantments? I love when a Cataclysm like is just
when you keep it all, keep one of everything.
Yeah, I've got one of everything. You've got nothing. That's the best. I love.
Dude, I'm gonna keep this Germ. I'm gonna keep this Batter Skull. I'm gonna keep.
Oh, there's Rest in Peace. That's an enchantment. Back to basics. So yeah, like I think these the creature mixes. There's some variation. So we see some number of Snapcaster Mages. Could be 1. Could be 3. So there's a Vendilion Click in Maxime Doors 12th place version, along with that Teferi. The Niv Magus Elemental I'm not into. I gotta say, I'd rather have a Terramander.
Kevin Fiber had 2 main deck back to basics.
Main?
That's a hate. 2 main deck back to basics. He didn't play Delver of Secrets. He was just playing a more controlling version that instead of those Delver of Secrets, he had an extra Jace. Yeah, extra Jace, a Mendex Supreme Verdict, and
counterspell. This is it.
Yeah.
I'm down with this. This is not the market.
Delver Secrets versus Verdict Fairy.
This is I'm down for this deck. But these decks obviously blend into each other, right? Like they don't even in other formats you have like way more distant amounts of mana between like an aggressive Azorius deck and like an Esper control deck. These decks all have within 1 or 2 mana of each other, like whether they're casting 5s or casting 1s.
There's another blue-white deck showing up, Keaton Woods, with an update to Miracles. And obviously, Jace the Mind Sculptor, better than all. But here's the twist. He's got 2 counterbalances that he helps set up with Mission Briefing.
Oh, I don't know about this card. Tell me about this.
So Mission Briefing is blue instant Surveil 2. Then choose an instant or sorcery card in your graveyard. You may cast that card this turn. If that card would be put into your graveyard this turn, exile instead. So what you do is you Mission Briefing, and first of all, you might just be able to counter their card with either of the top 2 cards. If you know the top 2, if one of the top 2 cards happens to be the right cost, then your counterbalance will be sweet anyway, right? But even if it's not the right cost, you can flash back a Brainstorm and set up the top of your deck so that it is the right cost. And that's not even counting the fact that there's stuff like Ponder and Preordain and so on, right? But Mission Briefing is also giving you some sweet Terminus equity where you're able to set up the top of your deck and try to arrange for Terminus to happen at the time you want.
That's spectacularly cool.
And the other thing is sometimes you Jace the Mind Sculptor, put the 2 cards back, and you know the right answer is the next one down, not the top card. So you mission briefing and you switch the order, right? But another thing you can do is you Jace, of course, you just Jace, put back 2 things. The top one is not the right answer. The next one down is. So instead, you respond by casting Accumulated Knowledge. That's a throwback.
I mean, here's the thing. I love so many things about this deck. This deck is the definition of sweet. However, given the fact that this deck is a Jace the Mind Sculptor deck, i.e. has the ability to boomerang things at will, you would think this is the kind of deck that a Reanimator deck would really not want to play against. But if you remember we were talking about Chancellor of the Annex, this deck has 19 lands and intends to cast Entreat the Angels at some point. Right? Like, it's super reliant on these like Preordain, Ponder, Mission Briefing, Accumulated Knowledge, Brainstorm to even get its lands. I don't know. I feel like real dodgy about this. The average red deck in Legacy has more lands than this.
Dude, what about Enlightened Tutor, man? Like, look at this sideboard, man. What if you just played your main deck was just like, I've got Counterbalance, I've got an Oblivion Ring, I've got Back to Basics, I've got maybe some Rest in Peace or something. But then, like, your opponent casts a spell and you respond with, you already have Counterbalance in play. You respond by Enlightening Tutor for the right casting cost. You can even have like a moat in there.
Love it. And why don't I just play Helm at this point?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
if you've got Rest in Peace and Helm.
That's a 2-card kill.
Yeah. Now we're talking. Let's make that happen.
Yeah, I think that's solid. What's the activation cost on Helm? Is it just tap?
You have to tap and pay X, and X has got to be, like, you're just going to start milling cards, right? Like, so you only need, for Helm of Obedience, you only need to, so you tap it and pay X. Target opponent puts cards from their library into their graveyard until a creature card or X cards are put into their graveyard this way. X can't be 0. So if you put Helm of Obedience down, you're going to have 1 more to spend, even if you have Rest in Peace. And the way the combo works is, of course, Rest in Peace is going to exile all the cards instead of them going to the graveyard. So what will end up happening is that even though you've only milled them for 1, it's not really that you've milled them for 1. It's that you're going to mill them until a creature or X cards are put into the graveyards. So a creature or just a card in general is put into their graveyard, but if they never put any cards in their graveyard, you'll mill their whole deck. Which, because of Rest in Peace, no cards will go to their graveyard, they'll just have no deck. So the whole combo is 2 for Rest in Peace, and then 4+1 for Helm of Obedience.
I'm into it. I'm into the moat. I'm into the Enlightened Tutor package. This sounds awesome to me. I feel like we can play like Energy Field or something, right? And just play a bunch of basics. Especially if you want to go back to basics, right?
Yeah.
I can't get behind 19 land then. That's my only caveat.
Well, okay, how about this? 19 land plus a Mishra's Bauble or something. First of all, it's a 0 in case you need to counter a 0 with Counterbalance. But second of all, dude, you can set up the top of your deck.
Yeah,
Ish.
That is cool. I mean, why don't I just play 4 Mishra's Baubles? That sounds good. I'm into it.
I don't know. I don't know, man. I think Enlightened Tutor for Mishra's Bauble is kind of sketchy, personally.
Well, okay, it's not that sketchy. Like, the Enlightened Tutor is just a counterspell for 1, right? And you're getting a card that you would plausibly want to draw. Like, you're not going to, like, put the card on top of your library to counter a spell that you don't want to draw unless it's going to win the game, right? Or, like, you're going to lose or something, right? It's... Like, I'm not going to just put, like, mode on top of my library against blue-white unless I really need to counter Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Dude, what about 1 Crucible of Worlds? Just keep recurring your strip mines or your wasteland?
Yeah, this is perfect. I'm into it. This is my new favorite deck. What, are you kidding? I don't even need any convincing. I need to own a moat. I don't own any moats. Do I have to have Jace the Mind Sculptor? Like, I know that's a stupid question to you, but at the same time...
No, it's great. So you know what you can do? Is you can take Moat and Rest in Peace and put them back on top of your deck, and then you use Enlightened Tutor, fail to find. Just shuffle that away.
Jace the Mind Sculptor, truly you do everything.
Dude, you could go get Seat of the Synod if you wanted.
Oh, yeah.
Fix your mana that way.
It's not an unfriendly format. So, I mean, you
can have one scroll rack, because if you don't have Sensei's Divining Top anymore, it's kind of sweet to have scroll rack with counterbalance. And if you have one scroll rack in your deck and Latent Tutor setting it up, I don't know. That doesn't sound like it would be crazy.
It's just not sad. I was never good at using scroll rack. I feel like this is a complexity question for me.
Dude, you could have one land tax in your deck.
I mean, do you remember Randy won like the extended North American Championship with his land tax scroll rack beatdown deck back in '97? I feel like you top baited that event with Necropotence or something.
I don't know. I used to play a lot of scroll rack beatdown decks, but I don't know. I also played a lot of Necropotence. Who knows? But yeah, I don't know, man. I'm not so sure that we should just be going so far off the rails with this whole Enlightened Tutor package, but I kind of want to.
It seems all right to me. I think you'd be dramatically behind against other blue-white decks, but probably be pretty solid against other people. Like, I mean, is Circle of Protection red out of the question? I mean, like, look at
why Circle Protection? You like Circle Protection red more than Rune? I'm talking about Rune of Protection red.
Rune of Protection red's better. Yeah. Well, I mean, if we have a bunch of islands, you can't activate Rune of Protection red with island, right?
Yeah.
But I think
you wouldn't lose some.
Blue might be good. That might be a solid.
Dude, Rune of Protection blue.
You're
just not into the runes, man.
I love the runes. Don't get me wrong. I love them. I drafted Infinity Runes back in the day, and most of them got cycled. But I drafted them. But yeah, I actually think this is a pretty cool idea. Monastery Mentor, talk to me about this as a finisher in Legacy.
Love. Obviously, it's not as busted about the whole Sensei's Divine Top thing, but there's a reason that this card is restricted in Vintage. Monastery Mentor is just the filthiest. This was a preview card of mine back in the late 80s, and I think its time has really come again, over and over and over again. I think part of it is that it's like a young Pyromancer turned up to 11.
Yeah, the fact that the 1/1 creatures have prowess, like, that's just excessive, right? Like, he himself has prowess.
You just so quickly kill them until they're dead.
I mean, you just like put like 12 power into play immediately, right? And then just attack with it. And it's so much material because you're getting them both ways.
Yeah. Dude, what about Chains of Mephistopheles making a comeback? In TJ Raymore's sideboard of his Golgari Depths deck, he's got sideboard Chains of Mephistopheles.
That card always confuses me. I would never really understood why it was
because it's confusing.
Like, too many different things might happen when it's in play.
Every time a player draws a card, that player must first discard a card from his or her hand. If there are no cards in that player's hand, take the top card from the library and place it in the graveyard instead of drawing. This enchantment does not apply to the first card drawn by the player during the draw phase. So you see, when you've got a Chains of Mephistopheles, all of your opponent's brainstorms and ponders are terrible. That's the whole thing, is that you just put chains down against somebody who plays cantrips, because now every cantrip is one less than a cantrip.
Got it. If you have two...
The old school combo... They do. Now, your first draw is still free, but the old combo used to be Howling Mine plus 2 Chains of Mephistopheles, because then your opponent's just locked out.
Oh, because... the first one they gets free, but then they have to draw 2 more, and then they get negatived, right?
Right. So now if they have instants, they could still cast, like, if the first card they draw for their turn is a disenchant, they can get out of it because it's an instant and it's the first one. But if it's the second one, they just discard it and they don't even draw it. But if it's a sorcery or a creature or whatever, they're just not even going to get to have a chance to use it.
Yeah, this seems pretty cool.
That's the kind of technology that we were into in 1995. 1996. That was like the best we could do.
My only question is, like, this deck has a lot of tutoring, but no tutoring for Chains of Mephistopheles. So, like, one copy of Chains of Mephistopheles in the sideboard is kind of like, eh. You know what I mean? Like, I get it.
Yeah, but there's crop rotation.
That doesn't get an enchantment. like there's Sylvan Scrying. You're right, Mike. There is Sylvan Scrying. That doesn't get a Chains of Mephistopheles.
Sorry. It's bad open humor. Yeah, no, you're right. Finding one random enchantment, I don't know. Maybe it's just diminishing returns, but sometimes maybe you just only own one. And Chains of Mephistopheles is such a dope card.
Well, it's $1,000 card, so I
can tell you that I
totally
played
get
with
not owning more than one.
I played with Moat in more decks than I otherwise would have from just having a dope English Legends Moat, you know?
Yeah. Well.
Just when it's like sitting there looking at you. There was a Grixis Arclight Phoenix deck. Like, as far as Arclight Phoenix decks go, this one's kind of actually warrants looking at. Over in the Classic, 12th place, Doug McKay's Grixis deck. It's not what you might expect. So there's 3 Arclight Phoenixes, right? But this is a deck with 1 Tendrils of Agony. You see, this is an Infernal Tutor, Lion's Eye Diamond, Lotus Petal, Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual, Buried Alive deck. What you do is you go turn 1 Dark Ritual, Buried Alive. Those are 2 spells. You put 3 Arclight Phoenixes into your graveyard. And then you play Lotus Petal or Lion's Eye Diamond and get all 3 up and attack for 9.
I like it. That's like your intuition idea.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's Legacy, so you're getting 3 instead of 2.
So Oliver Tomiko, the champ, also played a Grixis Phoenix deck. In the Open, he actually played 17th place. He had Arclight Phoenix and some black creatures and some red creatures and many, many blue spells. How did he get the...
Yeah, this one's a little more traditional.
Well, he's still burying alive.
You're right. He's still buried alive, and he still has Lotus Petal, which is great. But obviously, he's not really doing the Tendrils of Agony type of thing. Instead, the whole Infernal Tutor Tendrils of Agony thing. But something I do really like is Cabal Therapy. Cabal Therapy is a great way to trigger Arclight Phoenix, both coming and going.
Because it's free.
Yeah, and then it's free.
Yeah,
you could sack an Arclight, so you could Cabal Therapy them, sacrifice your Arclight Phoenix to Cabal Therapy them again.
2 spells.
2 spells, and then you play your 3rd spell, and you get the Phoenix back anyway.
Ah, awesome. Yeah, that card's always been awesome next to Young Pyromancer. And, there is some Young Pyromancer action here.
Yeah. But I do think Arclight Phoenix is just so underplayed in Legacy right now.
Well, at least we see the path, right? We're talking about,
Buried Alive. Very sick. Buried Alive. That's a big winner from this week.
I like it. I think that we're probably going to see more of this Buried Alive Arclight Phoenix action. It's just too powerful to ignore. And with Dark Ritual, the thing is, Dark Ritual minus card, Buried Alive minus card with Arclight Phoenix is actually +3. So it's a very different point of view on spells.
Yeah. Yep. All right, man. Well, lots of awesome stuff. I know we only touched on modern a little bit before kind of segueing over, but there's just so much dope stuff. It's nice to see when Legacy starts getting impacted so much,
Oh, absolutely. Cool.
All right, awesome. See you next week.
Bye, Patrick.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredge, so jailer hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left